Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 19th of January 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
And behind the technical desk, Nick Green. Well, the weather in Plymouth is blue skies, sunshine and pretty cold, with a bit of frost and frozen rain overnight. Reports coming into us around the country, generally the same, blue sky, cold weather, and Crieff in Scotland, I believe, dusting of snow. So north of the border, we finally got some reports in, and the Scots will need their woolly underwear on under those kilts. Well, what better place to start, therefore, than Robert Greene, the very brave anti-child abuse campaigner who has suffered imprisonment twice. Robert is due to appear in Aberdeen court at 10 o'clock this coming Wednesday. The charge against him is breach of a non-harassment order. Robert has recently spent 3 months in prison, and he's spent about 1 year under house arrest, reporting to police daily. We await to see what justice is meted out by the Aberdeen court on Wednesday. Anybody who can attend, please do. It's so important for the public to see justice being done. And of course, Robert has suffered so much in his journey to try and protect children, not only in Scotland and not only Holly Gregg in particular, but also throughout the United Kingdom. And we understand that progress that has been made for a full investigation into child abuse in Scotland has received a boost from the campaigning efforts of Robert Greene. Well, we're now going to move on to really what is a news flash. We have been receiving very, very disturbing news about the brave child abuse survivor and whistleblower Melanie Shaw. This is the lady who first blew the whistle on child abuse in Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham, and that very quickly resulted in at least 100 victims at that children's home alone being known. However, since that time, Melanie has been imprisoned in Peterborough Prison, where she was bullied, put in solitary confinement, denied proper medical treatment, and having been found guilty in a court in Nottingham on charges of negligent arson and criminal damage. She's now under a probation order, but yesterday she was reporting to us in a very distressed state that she had been picked up by Nottingham police and taken to Queen's Hospital to a special mental assessment unit. Now, we will cover here the tweets that we put out yesterday. Let's have a look at those. This was on Saturday initially, and it's continued over the weekend. So the main point is that Melanie Shaw contacted us to report that basically she was being followed and harassed by Nottingham police, and this had escalated after she'd made a complaint of rape to the police. So my tweet here said that we'd received a very distressed telephone call from Melanie Shaw saying that she was waiting for a psychiatric assessment in the Queen's Unit, Nottingham. She was very frightened that they were working to section her, and of course the aim of this, we believe, would be to silence her as a very vital child abuse whistleblower. So we followed up that initial report by saying that we then understood that around 7 p.m, this is Saturday night, Melanie was discharged. We were waiting confirmation from her, and we are making the point here that it's interesting. The state in the United Kingdom does not help child abuse victims, it victimises them further. We established that Melanie was out. She had been treated very badly. We understand she was strip searched again, and in her reports to the UK column, Melanie consistently said that she was being subjected to harassment by Nottingham police, followed in cars, late night phone calls, and she was extremely concerned for her safety. The comment we made was this sick government which abuses victims to protect abusers. It's up to all of us, all of the members of the public, to stop the criminal activity of David Cameron's Conservative government. And we stand by those comments, and we're also standing by the reports that we've had from Melanie that she has suffered 2 weeks of constant harassment by not only the police in the Nottingham area, but also the local authorities. If we sum it up, it's clear that the victims of child abuse in UK simply do not have a voice as far as the authorities are going. And of course, 300 people at a meeting in Westminster last week in order to complain about child abuse throughout UK, and the fact that Theresa May has consistently failed to get a full investigation underway. None of the mainstream press or media reported those 300 people. Aside from the sheer horror of the fact that a British government would protect child abusers, let's look at what Melanie was threatened with, because the unit in Nottingham, like many others throughout the country, works on Section 136. Here is the Section 136 fact sheet. The police taking you to a place of safety from a public place. So it's sold as if this is something nice, but here are all of the rules. A place of safety can be a hospital or a police station. The police can move you. Have a look at the detail on this piece of paper, which is setting out how any of us could be picked up at any location, public location or private location, by the police and simply put into a gulag of mental assessment.
On a whim?
On a whim.
Yeah.
The police have the power to remove you from a public place if they think you have a mental illness. They think. All they've got to do, Mike, as you've just pointed out, is think that you have a mental illness and you're in immediate need of care and control, and they can deliver you into a psychiatric unit. And this is a more detail here. You can be on this section for up to 72 hours until an approved mental health professional and or doctor sees you. And of course, ultimately, you can be sectioned. But what we picked up in this document is it refers you directly to a charity, rethink.org. So here we are. This is the charity given the power behind Section 136. And if you visit their website, they're saying in very encouraging, slightly cuddly terms, well, trust Rethink. We're here to protect people with mental illness. But in fact, Rethink, of course, are working very closely with the police, it would appear, and in Section 136 documentation.
It was very interesting that on the radio this morning, they were talking about mental health and so on, and they were saying that not enough money was being put into mental health care for children. And one of the people that was, I can't remember the details of this now, but one of the people that was commenting on this was saying what a great job the government was doing and that the government deserved thanks and so on. And then used the words charity in the same sentence as government. And the implication absolutely was that government and charity is the same thing. And I just thought that was a fascinating little suggestion through the BBC.
A nudge. I think that's a nudge. Yeah. We're talking about applied psychology here. Let us come back just briefly before you continue, Mike, and say that Melanie Shaw, as a victim of unspeakable abuse, not only in her family life as a very small child, but then in the care of the state in Children's Home Beechwood, has received absolutely no proper psychiatric or clinical psychology care from the state in order to deal with her suffering as an abuse victim. And of course, this is the pattern across Britain. No help at all from the victims, but when it comes to delaying and stalling a proper investigation into the crime of paedophilia, particularly by the establishment and politicians, well, of course, unlimited time, money and effort.
That's why we need a grand jury.
Indeed.
Well, Nick Clegg, President of the Privy, is of course in charge of mental health this big push for mental health in the lead up to the election, and he has released this little infographic today, saying that 1 in 4 people in the UK, that's 25% of us, are going to become mentally ill this year, according to that mental case. So there you go, 25% of us. And today, though, he is focusing on suicide, and suicide, well, he's saying here he's committed, and indeed he should be, but he's saying he's committed to a new ambition for 0 suicides across the NHS. And I'll just quote a little bit from this. It says, Nick is today, Monday the 19th of January, hosting a mental health conference with the Liberal Democrat Care and Support Minister Norman Lamb. The event brings together leading doctors, policymakers and campaign groups to discuss the future of mental health services in England. The 0 suicide ambition is about changing how people who are in NHS care are treated so that they are not forgotten when they move or leave the health service they have been in. So in other words, what he's saying is, when people leave, stop receiving the care that they really should be getting, then that increases suicide. And well, that would seem like common sense.
It's interesting that none of the Lib Dems assisted at all in the South West Wales suicides, and when UK Column and other researchers were pushing information into the government, into a number of MPs, pointing out the despicable information being put out to Welsh school children in plays and so-called help groups, there was a wall of silence across all 3 parties. So total hypocrisy, as we might expect from the Lib Dems under Privy, what is he?
He's President
of the Privy.
Yeah.
President of the Privy, Clegg.
So anyway, I'll just quote a little bit here. He said, suicide is and always has been a massive taboo in our society. People are genuinely scared to talk about it, never mind intervene. That's why I'm issuing a call to every part of the NHS to commit a new ambition for 0 suicides, except, it seems, when suicide is assisted, as can be seen in this slide here. If the suicide is assisted, then clearly there's tons of support for as many as possible. Yes. Yeah. Although the House of Lords has successfully held up the assisted suicide bill probably until after the general election through their debate at the end of last week, and they basically tabled so many amendments to this that it can't proceed before the election. It seems that may only be a formality, or at least that's how it's being presented. The delay has to be good for anybody that's in opposition to it, of course, because it gives them more time to continue with that opposition. 150 amendments were tabled in the House of Lords on Friday, although it has to be said, many of those amendments were quite small things. I mean, at least in terms of the operational aspects of this, but perhaps some of the language that's used. Unfortunately, the amendment that was tabled to change the wording of the bill from assisted dying to assisted suicide was defeated. So that assisted dying, of course, makes it seem a little more cuddly or something, I don't know. But Falconer, of course, Lord Falconer, who's behind this bill, is saying that although it's unlikely to become law before the end of this Parliament, he's saying that really it's a done deal because peers, instead of debating whether or not it should become law, are really debating the detail. The acceptance is there that it will become law, and they're debating the detail of it. Others are saying, well, actually, that's a bit premature to be suggesting that it's a done deal in that way, but it probably is, unless something significant happens over the election period, and that is our opportunity to make opposition to this type of legislation keenly felt. Yeah,
something has to be done.
Yeah.
Well, we've just had a news report in, and we understand that the situation around Melanie Shaw is particularly bad. It would appear that she had a particularly violent break-in, a door kicked in during the night. And if the reports are correct, at the moment there's some sort of standoff with individuals who appear to have broken into Melanie Shaw's home, and Melanie is in a very, very distressed state. I'm going to make a live plea that if there are any people in the Nottingham area who feel that they could give Melanie some direct support. I think that is badly needed. But here we are on live British media. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the vicious victimisation of child abuse whistleblowers. We are talking about child abuse victims who are denied proper counselling and psychiatric support from the state. And of course, police who are prepared to stand on the sideline, failing to protect very vulnerable people. So if anybody can help in the Nottingham area, Melanie needs your assistance now.
And what, they should contact us in order to get the details?
If people would contact us, we will be able to give them further information. And we'll also provide updates on Twitter as the day continues. Well, this leads us probably inappropriately or very nicely, depending on how you look at it, to the subject of Britain's royal family. And of course, the main media report today is that Prince Andrew has now appointed a QC. He's going to fight the allegations from the underage lady, as was in America. And what we now know, of course, is he's going to get an extremely high-profile QC. Queen's Counsel, doesn't that mean you just select one of the councils that have pledged allegiance to your family in the first place? So we've got an interesting situation, and of course the papers are reporting that Andrew is now going to go to Davos. If we can just pop that one up again, Nick, please. We'd like to say what unbelievable hypocrisy. What Prince Andrew is basically saying, don't judge my friends or their values because he has been mixing with somebody convicted of this type of offence. I'm here to represent all of the British public. So we should all feel delighted today to know that Prince Andrew, who's very happy to meet with the likes of Mr. Epstein, is the man now going to represent us on the world stage, to which I think UK column says, not in our name. And we've also had this report brought to our attention. It's the Telegraph talking about child abuse in St Helena. And what a civil servant is saying is that despite all of the reports into central government, nothing was actually done. And we put out a little while ago this little graphic, of course, pointing out David Cameron wanting to move on and child abuse, and also pointing out his flawed judgment, pictured top right, common purpose. Paedophile somehow got close to David Cameron. Well, Reaper, that must be. Yeah, well, this is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Perhaps it should be called the Deregulation of Investigatory Powers Act because, of course, since the secondary legislation has basically expanded the scope of this, even the BBC has begun to use it, according to the Belfast Telegraph here. And they spoke to the BBC, and the BBC has confirmed the use of RIPA in Northern Ireland in order to try to track down people who are evading their television license. So this is clearly not what this legislation was intended for. It was only intended as allegedly an anti-terrorist measure. And to my knowledge, to date, nobody has ever said that evasion of television license, although it's still a criminal offence, I haven't heard anybody suggesting that it's a terrorist offence. Until now, presumably. Yeah, so that's that. But moving on, very interesting blog in the Mail over the weekend from Peter Hitchens, and I suggest that everybody goes and has a read of that, because basically what he's suggesting, or what he's pointing out here, is that we have the Civil Contingencies Act, which could turn Britain into de facto dictatorship overnight, if, as he says, politicians can find an excuse to activate it. But he's highlighting the Counter-Terrorism and Security Bill, which is getting no coverage in the mainstream media at all, apart from this, as far as I can see, slipping its way, as he says, quietly and quickly through Parliament. Well, really, this is going to require people to, if they're holding a public meeting, for example, to declare what the
what the details of that are before they hold the meeting and so on?
So the government does the core of its business through the Privy Council, which of course is a secret as far as the public are concerned. So the government operates at a secret level, but it wants to know when we're meeting, we the public are meeting.
That's right. Now he just finishes off his piece with a very interesting little statement. He says, but so far there's been nothing but a tiny mouse squeak of protest against this dangerous anti-British concrete-headed twaddle. It will go through, and in 10 years' time we'll wonder why we're locking people up for thinking. We'll ask, how did this happen? And he says, this is how it happens.
Well, of course, Peter Hitchens simply doesn't understand the gravity of the situation, because the government is already locking people up in mental institutions because of what they think. If Peter Hitchens would like to make contact with the UK column, we'll talk to him about 5 cases about mothers being put in mental institutions simply trying to protect their children from paedophiles and sexual abuse.
But of course, what he's then saying that's being extended to as a form of thought crime, which, you know, staggering, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not concrete. It's planned. It's calculated.
Yeah.
Well, where does this go? Let's have a look at reports around GCHQ over the weekend. Well, here's the famous donut, and the headline from the Mail: watching them, watching us. First ever pictures from inside the heart of Britain's GCHQ spying station show intelligence agency keeping eyes and ears on global communications.
Yeah.
And this is just amazing, because what is this really about? David Cameron has apparently given personal approval for cameras to go inside this organisation. So here he is, David our King Cameron, pressing for further attacks on free speech and liberty. And this is the quote from the Mail article: the visit to the HQ was granted by David Cameron, who is pushing to give agencies like GCHQ access to encrypted communication. Last night, the Prime Minister warned internet firms they must work with security agencies to stop their networks becoming a safe haven from terrorists. But let's have a look at the propaganda around this, because there was a little video produced, which seems to have come from ITN. We're saying David Cameron Conservative government propaganda film of GCHQ. And this is one of the opening shots, spying on the world and the British public from between the 2 pillars. Here's the massive entrance of this building. Inside, we've got a logo clearly showing the GCHQ lettering encircling the globe. And then the real propaganda begins, because here we've got something quite fascinating, carefully posed shot inside GCHQ with a poppy inside the eye of the donut. We think this is nudging.
It's very emotive, isn't it?
Yeah, we are looking after the veterans. We're looking after historic people. This is very, very dangerous propaganda from David Cameron's Conservative government. And if anybody wants to go a bit deeper, we're going to say the occult meaning, of course, is a celebration of the blood of war and death in the eye of the donut.
He has a bit of a cheek criticising other people, alleging other people are running a death cult.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, in our opinion, Mike, I think we're agreed, aren't we? We know where the death cult is. It's based in Westminster. Let's continue through GCHQ. Well, this was a very interesting little shot showing some of the screens. Apparently they all watch screensavers all day. But what we noticed in the top of the shot here is something very interesting, because we have a gigantic screen with Google Earth, and there's a little Google logo to the right. So we're just going to ask the question, is GCHQ now working in partnership with Google? Of course, Google in partnership with the Conservative government. And what about this one? Well, what's interesting is this is starting to show us the scale of the organisation. Remember, GCHQ employs well over 5,000 people. It's been reported to UK column that some of the young employees are known as the McKinsey specialists, and they're regarded as young IT geeks who are fanatical in their spying work to the extent that they regard it as a sort of supercomputer game. So these are very, it would appear to us, dangerous people. And this is the incredible bit, of course, the political charity Common Purpose, which recruits future leaders to operate outside authority and holds secret meetings using Chatham House rules, has trained GCHQ staff in policy and organisational development, software engineering and senior operations departments. So we know that for a fact. We have a political charity, common purpose, training members of staff within GCHQ. Here's the nudging though. Well, nice people, nice young lady, just like ordinary people working at this job. And you can trust GCHQ because lots of shots of little cuddly toys. We're a cuddly, caring organisation and you can trust us. Well, of course you can't, because this is the reality. GCHQ, desperate for American dollars and taking about £100 million from the US and NSA, and reported quite accurately here in The Guardian that the US were keen to get into GCHQ's information because we've got such lax controls over people's freedom, and you can get in and spy on whoever you like. So there's GCHQ. Where could we go from that subject? Well, we're going to go straight on to this one, because we've now got JP suspended because they dared to put a Christian view across that an adopted child needs a mum and dad, not gay parents. And what was the result of that JP's judgment? Well, basically censured, disciplined, and has got to attend diversity training. Now, this is quite remarkable because we've got Michael Nazir Ali, former Bishop of Rochester. Look at what he says. Why can't the voice of Christians be heard? It's come to this after 1,500 years. Basically, Christianity is being pushed out of the land. And he says the Lord Chancellor and the Lord Chief Justice, by disciplining Richard Page, JP, have declared war on evil residual notions of the faith having any place in our legal processes. And this is the key bit. This smacks to me of the re-education camps so beloved of totalitarian Marxist states. Is this the way to promote liberty, or is it freedom of speech? And what is going on here? We are watching Marxism being drawn into Britain, and of course it's coming directly from this man using his Alinsky Marxist big society agenda. More of it. So we've got a nurse sacked for praying for a Muslim, and here's the young lady. We're going to simply say yet another attack on Christianity. It's unfolding in front of us, isn't it? And who's in control? Well, is it really David Cameron, or does this excellent photograph from the Mail really show us something that's going on? Mr. Juncker's presumably giving David Cameron his instructions. We're not going to give in over immigration or flow of workers in the EU. And the comment in the paper is the arch-federalist, who is an advocate of even closer union within Europe, said he would reject any attempt to change the EU treaties in order for Britain to restrict free movement of people within the 28 member states. So is it a puppet show? No independent UK politics. This is Boy Cameron simply receiving his instructions.
Well, indeed, and one of those, as is the case right across the European Union at the moment, is that no single government, so no opposition to this agenda. And of course, we've been saying for how many weeks now? Certainly a couple of months, that we expect to see a coalition government, but not just a coalition of two, a coalition of the many. And that appears to have broken into the mainstream now, because other commentators also now beginning to say that they cannot see any kind of clear winner at the next election, and it's looking like it's going to be at least a three-way coalition. Of course, if you've got a three-way coalition, what you're actually looking at is the one-party state, because you've no effective opposition to anything that the government is doing.
No, and of course, if the government makes all of its decisions in secret through the Privy Council, we are in a dictatorship, a single-party state.
It's interesting that the term that's being coined for this is the Rainbow Coalition.
Well, that would be appropriate. This is the transformation of UK into the golden age. This is Marxist communitarian politics, and this is the underlying theme across all three of the main parties. Interesting, it's taken the mainstream media so long to catch up with the predictions of the UK column.
Right. Well, anyway, in the meantime, Cameron is electioneering, and today he's saying basically any job will do, any old job will do, because he's aiming for 100% employment, and perhaps it's no coincidence that Cameron is claiming to do what communist regimes have always done. But anyway, 100% employment, what he's saying is that for him, of course, that term means that anyone who wants to get a job can get one, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what the terms of employment are and so on. As long as they get any old job. His goal is full employment. Currently we have 72% employment allegedly, but he expects we'll overtake Germany, who are on 74% employment. But this is an aspiration. It's not anything concrete, it's just an aspiration. So I guess we don't need to worry about that. But he says that only 2 to 4% of new jobs are in 0-hour contracts, and he says that that 95% of the jobs are full-time. This is in a speech he gave today, but of course he didn't mention what percentage of them are permanent and what percentage of them are temporary. But he said it is a myth that the economic recovery was only benefiting the South, or that most jobs were being taken by foreigners. So it's a myth that the economic recovery was only benefiting the South, which is news to the think tank Centre for Cities, because they released a report today, their Outlook 2015 report, and here it is. And what that says is for every 12 new jobs created in cities and towns in the South, only one is created in the North. So Cameron obviously clearly unsure about the meaning of the word myth. So this is a bit of concrete evidence here, which suggests that Cameron isn't quite telling the truth there. However, and they're also pointing out that the cost of living is horrendous in the South. And this sentiment really echoed on a larger scale by Oxfam today, who have produced this report, Wealth, Having It All and Wanting More. And this is really saying that the world's richest 1% are going to own more, are going to have more wealth than the 99% by next year. So this has been in the media quite a bit over the last 12 to 18 months about how the great divide in wealth is occurring. It is accelerating, and Oxfam really suggesting that it's accelerating to a point which is pretty unprecedented. And well, are people going to take it lying down? That's the question I have in my mind.
We hope not, because Mr. Glover is saying where the country is going. It's going to a dictatorship. That's happening very, very quickly as we see the massive surveillance. We see the gulag of brutal police activity and the psychiatric units. What is needed is for people to become active in the right way, peacefully, of course. And we'll give you a reminder that there's going to be another attempt to take the home of Tom and Sue Crawford, and that'll be this Friday.
Yeah.
So anybody who would like to not just sit there sending emails, but to get out and show solidarity, support for other people as they face the criminal activity of our courts and banks, make contact with the UK column. We'll give you further details.
Well, we'll put this up as an event on the front page of the UK column website this afternoon, so you can get the details this afternoon on ukcolumn.org.
Excellent. But there we are, good people, and of course peaceful, polite. The aim is education of the police in particular. Their families are just as much at risk from a dictatorship as anybody else. So the aim is peaceful education of public officials that you encounter. Do we give Alex a mention?
Yes, we do. Alex G, again, just another quick reminder, Thursday the 29th of January, if you want to attend his launch for his book, Mindful, then it's at Waterstones in Peterborough, but please email first, launch@alexg.com, because they'll have drinks and nibbles there, and they just want to make sure everybody's catered for. And of course, don't forget that the BCG UK Column Spring Conference is on the 28th of February, that should say, 1st of March, but obviously people hopefully arriving on the Friday evening. 28th February, 1st of March, Park Inn, Telford in Shropshire. It's very close to Birmingham, just off the motorway, no problem to get there. There's train links as well. Please make sure you come to that.
This is all about doing things in the lead up to the election, so we need as many people as possible because they are the people to go and spread the word. And I'm delighted to say that Ian Puddick has agreed to come as a speaker, and of course there is a man who really knows what the tragedy of the British police is at the moment, and how vicious the British state can be if you get too close to the truth. So we do need your attendance at that event, as many people as possible. I think we can take about 400, is that right, Mike? There we are. And we'll provide further updates on Melanie Shaw throughout the day. Emails, phone calls, tweets, giving her support and asking why Nottingham authorities are not protecting and nurturing this very brave woman. As many communications as possible, please. And we'll end on a note and say if this internet broadcast is visible on one of those enormous TV screens inside GCHQ, we'd like to say to all of you, I hope you have a very good afternoon at your desks. Don't spend too much time playing with your cuddly teddy bears. But if you'd like to know more details about the UK column, instead of spying, why don't you just ring us up and indeed give us an interview. Thanks very much. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon. It's Monday the 19th of January 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
And behind the technical desk, Nick Green. Well, the weather in Plymouth is blue skies, sunshine and pretty cold, with a bit of frost and frozen rain overnight. Reports coming into us around the country, generally the same, blue sky, cold weather, and Crieff in Scotland, I believe, dusting of snow. So north of the border, we finally got some reports in, and the Scots will need their Woolly Huntingdon police. And this had escalated after she'd made a complaint of rape to the police. So my tweet here said that we'd received a very distressed telephone call from Melanie Shaw, saying that she was waiting for a psychiatric assessment in the Queen's Unit, Nottingham. She was very frightened that they were working to section her, and of course the aim of this, we believe, would be to silence her as a very vital child abuse whistleblower. So we followed up that initial report by saying that we then understood that around 7 p.m, this is Saturday night, Melanie was discharged. We were waiting confirmation from her, and we are making the point here that it's interesting. The state in the United Kingdom does not help child abuse underwear on under those kilts. Well, what better place to start, therefore, than Robert Green, the very brave anti-child abuse campaigner who has suffered imprisonment twice. Robert is due to appear in Aberdeen court at 10 o'clock this coming Wednesday. The charge against him is breach of a non-harassment order. Robert has recently spent 3 months in prison, and he's spent about 1 year under house arrest, reporting to police daily. We await to see what justice is meted out by the Aberdeen court on Wednesday. Anybody who can attend, please do. It's so important for the public to see justice being done. And of course, Robert has suffered so much in his journey to try and protect children, not only in Scotland and not only Holly Gregg in particular, but also throughout the United Kingdom. And we understand that progress that has been made for a full investigation into child abuse in Scotland has received a boost from the campaigning efforts of Robert Green. Well, we're now going to move on to really what is a news flash. we have been receiving very, very disturbing news about the brave child abuse survivor and whistleblower Melanie Shaw. This is the lady who first blew the whistle on child abuse in Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham, and that very quickly resulted in at least 100 victims at that children's home alone being known. However, since that time, Melanie has been imprisoned in Peterborough Prison, where she was bullied, put in solitary confinement, denied proper medical treatment, and having been found guilty in a court in Nottingham on charges of negligent arson and criminal damage. She's now under a probation order, but yesterday she was reporting to us in a very distressed state that she had been picked up by Nottingham police and taken to Queen's Hospital to a special mental assessment unit. Now, we will cover here the tweets that we put out yesterday. Let's have a look at those. This was on Saturday initially, and it's continued over the weekend. So the main point is that Melanie Shaw contacted us to report that basically she was being followed and harassed by